Sara, thank you so much for joining us on the Starting Over podcast. It is such a pleasure to have you here.
Well, thank you so much for having me. Even though I'm jet lagged and tired, I am beyond honored to be here. Thank you.
So, I wanted to start with something that you mentioned in your book, actually, which is a question you ask: what is life asking of me? And the reason I want to start with that is because I don't think that we pause enough to reflect on where we are at and where we are going. And just the flip on that, like, what is life asking of me right now? It's an interesting take.
Yeah. What I like about that question is it contextualizes your life. It's not so incredibly self-centered. And I don't think there's anything wrong with focusing on yourself and centering your life around yourself. You should. But I think what it does, it brings in the wider picture. It brings in the perspective. It brings in the context. And instead of always seeking to fulfill what you want, what you need, what your desires are, it's also saying, okay, look around you and ask yourself, what is this context trying to teach me, show me? What is it asking of me? What kind of shift or change am I being gently nudged to make? And I think it's such a healthy way to just widen our perspective a little bit, and make sure that we're also contributing to this existence that we have, rather than just trying to make it um, about what we can
All about
receive.
us.
It's also about what we can give. Yeah, exactly. Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah, it's not just about us. I think there's something really nice and comforting about that too.
totally see that. And I think sometimes it helps to gain distance from ourselves and to imagine ourselves as like, okay, how would we advise somebody else in this situation as well? Like
Hmm.
just to separate ourselves a little bit from whatever it is that we're getting stuck in or over analyzing, ruminating, thinking about. Distance. There's something in that.
Uh, oh yeah, and I think so many times we actually know the answer to things. We just don't want to listen. And I think it's interesting because sometimes they'll say, okay, if this was your friend that was going through the situation and not you, what would you say to them as an observer? And most people will be able to give really phenomenal advice. The, the issue is not the advice. The issue is
Taking it.
the distance to actually take it. Yeah, to want to take your own advice. And so I love that perspective and that distance. And then they can see it very clearly, because it's so easy to go, I don't know what you do. I don't know what you do. And when in reality you do know what to do, you just don't want to do it.
Yeah. Okay. Called out here.
Been
I'm feeling
there.
called out, but
Yeah.
call yourself out here, girl. So tell me, is
Yeah.
there anything that you know that you should be doing right now in your own life? Or have you moved through
My
this?
God. Oh, I mean, I go through this all the time. Um, but I think boundary setting is something I need to be better at, for sure, especially when I'm traveling and I'm in every place for like 2, 3 weeks. And then there's, enthusiasm and so many requests come in, and I'm trying so hard to seize the day, which is such like a also like a great existential thing. But then I end up feeling incredibly burnt out or overwhelmed, or like I can't be present. And so what I'm trying to do is, when I'm traveling, to really start putting up those boundaries a bit more firmly. I'm great in my everyday life, but when I travel, and I travel like 6 months a year. So that definitely needs to change. That's how I need to call myself out. What about you? I want to hear you call yourself out.
Okay, calling myself out. I don't focus enough on one particular thing. I don't give
Mm.
myself a chance to really fully go all in on something in the present
Mm.
moment, taking action in the present moment so that I show up as my best self. Yeah.
That's good. That's good. I
Yeah.
think everyone can
And
relate to
I give
that
all
to
the
some
advice.
extent.
I give all I give all the advice. I know
Uh,
what I need to do. And you're so right. It's like, okay, how do you take it yourself? You've got to take it yourself. Yeah.
mhm,
Yes. I'm curious though, because you said about moving around a lot, spending a lot of your time traveling, and
mhm.
you actually grew up moving a lot yourself. didn't you?
Mhm. Yeah, I mean, I'm not sure moving would be the word. It's more like escaping probably for the first couple of years. But yeah, I was born in Bosnia and then the Bosnian War started and we moved to Serbia. And then we were in Serbia for several years and then the Kosovo conflict, NATO bombing started. Then we moved to Canada. And even within Canada, I think there was a lot of moving just within the same city. So that was kind of the foundation, the nomad foundation I probably got. That wasn't intentional per se. I don't think it was like a choice. My parents were like, let's move her every couple of years. Um, and now I live as a nomad. So a lot of people are trying to like psychoanalyze me, like, is this why? Do you not feel a sense of home or belonging? Do you want to run away? And I think it's really cute and kind of fun. And that the individuals are so invested in this. And I would definitely say when I started traveling, maybe like oh my God, it's almost been a decade now, but 8 years ago, there was a healthy dose of escapism at that point, and the rationale behind starting to travel. And now it's definitely not rooted in that at all. Now it's work and it's fulfillment and it's the fact that I've created community all over the world and it's staying in touch with that. But yeah, I started off moving a lot as a kid, and it was kind of accidental.
Yeah. Let's go back to the part or the time in your life where you did describe yourself as being quite lost and
Hmm.
unsure. Yeah, you said, what did you say? I think you wrote in your book, there was a moment where I realized, oh, I can't be the passive observer in my own damn life anymore. Like I spent a lot of my time daydreaming about having a different life, fantasizing about the endless could have beens as a way to cope with my reality. Oof. I
Hmm.
don't know how many people listening find themselves in that where they go, okay, this is where you're at right now. This is the hard truth. Maybe there's some aspect of your life that you want to change, whether that be a relationship or workplace or even career in general. Um, and you get caught in those loops of imagining the possibility and not actually doing anything about it.
Oh my God, yeah. Daydreaming was a huge thing for me. I think it was like a way to not just step back from the reality I didn't want, but it was almost the only way I felt authentic in a very ironic way was like to get in touch with who I truly was. And I had to do it in my imagination because my reality was so disconnected from what would have been authentic or aligned. And for someone like me, that was relationally, that was, I mean, friendships and my marriage at the time, it was how I lived my day-to-day life. It was just like as basic as just looking at my daily routine and going, which part of this aligns with you? And going like nothing. And that was incredibly devastating because I thought I was doing the right thing. And I thought that I mean, I was being patted on the back for having this life at 24. And you're like, wow, you really figured it out at 24. Check.
Quick pause. If you're a regular listener to the show and you have found value in these episodes, I would be immensely grateful if you pledged your support. Reality is, podcasting is not a free venture. There are many behind the scenes costs. But with your support, you'll be able to help me fuel the growth of this podcast and keep bringing you bigger and better guests each and every week. And of course, the signature honesty and real talk, which I'm known for. So if you'd like to say thanks and support the show for less than a cup of coffee per week, you can click the link called Patreon in the show notes. Thanks so much in advance, guys. Back to the episode.
I started grad school at 22, so I got accepted immediately. I got married that summer before grad school. I was part of my community where every weekend I would do things, and I lived close to my family and his family, and so we were trying to kind of honor that and upkeep those relationships. And we, every weekend we would go boating with friends. Like it was just, like think about the life you're supposed to have. And I kind of had it. And not in like a financial way. It's not like I was sitting there on a yacht, but the thing is we did all the right things. Um, and the way I looked, the way I dressed, the way I presented, and everything was just kind of like, wow, she has it so together. And I'd have friends at the time be like, wow, you're doing so well in grad school and you're juggling so many things. Like they would joke like, I want to be like you when I grow up. And I remember getting that statement and just being like, my God, I truly hope you never experience what I'm experiencing. I hope you never get this because I don't think you know what you're asking. And just putting a smile on my face and be like, you're so sweet, blah, blah, blah. Like just fully immersed in this delusional life in terms of it wasn't my life. I just felt like someone picked me up, plopped me into this plot line that was created for me by someone else. And I was an observer and I just went, okay, I'm expected to do this, so I will. And I think there's a lot of reasons, and we can talk about this if you want to later, of like why I put myself in that position or why I was willing to go through with it. But yeah, I definitely, there was no agency, there was no like alignment, there was no decision making. I very much just did what I thought I needed to do. And I was incredibly unhappy. And that's not to say that what I had was bad. I think that's an important distinction here. Nothing I had was bad. It's not like objectively you look at those things and you're like, wow, everyone would be miserable having those things. No, they just weren't mine. And even good things, if they don't align with you, are not going to feel fulfilling. Back to that purpose. Your purpose is so linked, your meaning is so linked to your sense of identity that even if you accomplish these wonderful things and you're incredibly successful, but that didn't feel like your goal, like your values, it's going to be worthless. And that's something that I don't think we talk about enough.
Yeah, I can so see that. It's why I think so many of us end up ticking things off and feeling quite hollow inside ultimately because
Absolutely.
you haven't lived a life that's authentic to you and your own goals, your own dreams, your own ambitions. Yeah. But hey,
Yeah,
it's
well
all a
said.
learning curve and I don't think any of it is bad because
Absolutely.
at some point you wake up and then you think, okay, that's great. Like one of my favorite quotes is by Maya Angelou and she says, when you know better, do better. It's as simple as that. I think so many
Totally.
of us, we get so stuck in the, oh, this is so heavy. Self-forgiveness, man. Like move on and move forward. It's okay.
Absolutely. I love that attitude. And because I think life is so fluid, your sense of self is so fluid. I kind of love that. It liberates me because I go, okay, I made a bunch of decisions that led me here and I don't like it. Okay, where do I want to go next? It's that attitude. It's like, you know better, do better. It's like, great. Now I want to go there. So what decisions do I need to make to go there? And I think that's something that I love about existentialism. It's not so deterministic. It doesn't take it so seriously. It's like, okay, cool. Now you're in charge of your own life moving forward. Do what you will.
Well, let's go to actually what existentialism is. I think the only context I've heard it in is when we say, okay, you're probably in your 20s and you have an existential crisis, or in your midlife and you go, oh, what on earth? And everything comes crashing around you. And you go, what is my life? Who am I?
I love it. Exactly. No, existentialism, I love it when people are like, okay, so that's a bunch of dead old men that talked about some questions no one knew how to answer. And okay, you're a therapist, so I kind of understand that. And you're trying to put those together, and that I really don't understand. Like, this is the summary of like, what is an existential therapist? So, I explain it this way. Every therapist, when someone walks into their room or their session, we'll have a way to understand the problem, the suffering, where the client wants to go. We will all try to conceptualize it and kind of get a clear picture in our head. And how we do that is everyone has a theory that they practice from. So if you practice from attachment theory, when a client walks in, you'll start to kind of pick up on narratives and their attachments, and that's how you're going to conceptualize what's happening and maybe how to help them. As an existentialist, I'm taking all the themes from the old white dead guys in terms of responsibility and meaning and isolation and authenticity. And that is what I'm looking at. So the number one thing I personally look at when a client comes in is what kind of relationship they have to responsibility. How much or how little responsibility and agency are they taking in their own life? So that's something that is at the forefront and it helps me kind of conceptualize what's happening for them and how to guide them to go where they want to go.
Let's break that down a little bit more in terms
Mhm.
of the responsibility and the freedom,
Yes.
because they're probably linked in some ways. Would you say that the people who are least responsible desire freedom the most?
Ooh, I didn't even think about that. Correct. Yes, but I think they're very linked. They actually can't be, I don't think they can be separated, but to me, the degree of freedom you have is correlated directly to the degree of responsibility you have. And I can't unpack that. You
Yeah.
cannot be responsible.
Give me a story as well.
Okay, I'll give you a story as well. You cannot be responsible for something you weren't free to choose. So, for example, I mean, I'm going to use Viktor Frankl here for just a hot second because he's the one that said you're always free, which is another way of saying you're always responsible. Now, Viktor Frankl didn't have much choice. Therefore, I'm not really sure what he was responsible for. Like, he didn't get to choose when he wakes up, if he goes to a doctor, what he does throughout his day. And so if you do not have
interrupt, Viktor Frankl is an
Yes.
Austrian psychiatrist and Holocaust survivor who wrote a book called Man's Search for Meaning.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Yes.
Just to contextualize that.
Thank you for contextualizing that. I am just so deep in this world that I'm like, Victor, you know my boy Victor? No. Yes, definitely. So he's someone who survived arguably one of the worst moments in humanity. And yet he still argued that we are always free. And that's such a hard thing for me to accept, or it was a hard thing for me to accept, because I would look at him and be like, he's claiming this, yet I don't feel very free in my own life. And it's interesting because he says one of the last human freedoms is your choice of attitude, how you're going to feel about something, think about something, what meaning you're going to construct about something. And he's a perfect example of that, of not having freedom. As I said, what he's going to wear, if he's going to go to a doctor, what he's going to eat, if he's going to live or die. He had absolutely no choice in any of this. And yet he still found freedom, which I love. So that's like an extreme version of this. And I think the more freedom you have of what you're going to wear, what you're going to do, how you're going to spend your time, now that you have that freedom, that means you're going to make choices. And once you make choices, you are responsible for those choices because no one else can be responsible for those choices. And so for me, the more free you are, the more responsible you are. And the responsibility piece, a story. In my book, I talk about Chad. I picked a name. And so Chad is someone who, when they were in high school, something relationally traumatic happened. So either his first love cheated on him or his parents got divorced. And truly, it was really difficult for Chad. And now Chad is 30 something and he's mistreating all his partners. Okay. At what point is Chad responsible for his actions? When his parents got divorced, when he was cheated on, Chad had no choice in the matter, no freedom. So he wasn't really responsible for whatever happened, for the decisions of his parents or his partner. But now Chad is responsible because Chad has so much freedom in how he's going to act. And so at some point, I think we need to understand that Chad needs to take responsibility. And often people will say, okay, yeah, of course he needs to take responsibility because the people he's dating, he's really hurting. And I go, no, actually, it's really not about the people he's hurting because that's their responsibility. Chad should take responsibility so that he can have a healthy relationship because I want Chad to be happy, because I want Chad to feel safe enough to be loved and to be seen and to build intimacy. And oftentimes when we look at individuals like this, we want them to be better for the sake of others. And I always say, let's pause that for a second. Let's want him to be better so that he can have a better life. And so that's also a responsibility of like, now he has the freedom, the choice as an adult of how he shows up. And he's reducing this freedom and pretending he's not free because of something that happened to him 15 years ago.
Yeah, I guess we all find ourselves in that situation of, some people will choose the route of blaming and feeling doomed as such because of some circumstances that happened in their childhood or in their past, or others will use that as fuel to change. And I guess those two routes are always available. Yeah. What's the link between responsibility, discipline, and freedom?
Ooh, discipline.
Yeah,
I mean, I think when you think about authenticity, you assume there's like rainbows shooting out of the sky, and it's like this super pleasant experience. And although I think there is something incredibly empowering and healing about authenticity, it is also incredibly difficult. And this is where discipline does come in terms of you might know what feels right and you might still not do it. And this happens to me all the time. I think this happens to everyone. And then we get so angry and discouraged and disappointed because we're like, I knew I should have done that. Why didn't I do it? Like, what is wrong with me? There's like that dialogue and that frustration that comes in. And sometimes it's just lack of discipline. And I think that lack of discipline needs to be discerned from lack of self-respect. What I mean by that is sometimes we don't do things because we don't respect ourselves enough or value ourselves enough to prioritize that certain thing. Because it's like you would have had to sacrifice, I don't know, your time with friends or the comfort of X, Y, and Z in that moment, and you just weren't worth that sacrifice. And I think until we really recognize our true value, sometimes we're going to do things that don't honor us and are not authentic. So that is definitely a part of it, like what beliefs you have about yourself and what you deserve. But then once we do figure that out, to actually implement it takes a lot of practice, takes a lot of discipline, takes a lot of dedication. It's not just going to feel easy because you understand it. And there's so many individuals I work with that it's like, you know everything. Like I'll sit across and I'll be like, I know that you know absolutely everything, but the hurdle is actually to implement. And sometimes that boils down to pure discipline and dedication to do things that you don't want to do just because you know that they're right.
Yeah. Oh, isn't it the biggest differentiator? It really, really is.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's exhausting.
Isn't it? Isn't it? And I say that with compassion because I find it so hard in many respects to be disciplined and to do the things that I don't feel like doing in that moment. Something I try and remind myself of is that what feels hard now often makes your life easier later.
Oof, love that.
Yeah.
Love that. Absolutely. And also, if you can't do it all or if it's too much, start evaluating, like, why is it so hard? Are you taking on too many things that don't feel easy? How do you not set yourself up for failure, I think is important as well.
How you don't set yourself up for failure.
Yeah. Like, how do you ensure you're not setting yourself up for failure? Because it's, for example, New Year's Eve rolls around and someone has like 10 years resolutions and they're all so distinct and they're all completely disconnected from reality of who they are before the clock strikes 12. And then all of a sudden, they have all these goals of like, well, I envision my future self as a marathon runner, and I envision myself as someone who's in a relationship, and they're like single, never ran a day in their life. So, and so it's
Right.
just like,
Yeah.
okay, let's
Realistic.
chill. Yeah,
Yeah.
let's choose one of those goals and then let's work towards it. But I mean, I picked an extreme example, but we do this all the time where we set ourselves up for failure because it's just like so unrealistic and so much at once, and you would need not just discipline, you would need like 10 clones of you to have a discipline to actually carry out your plan. And so I think sometimes we just gotta do baby steps.
Baby steps all the way. So I'm curious with you and your own life because you speak about in your book the journey that you went on to get out of this place where you said you're fantasizing and daydreaming about what could be, but not what your life actually was. Where did the change, or how did the change happen for you, and what does that actually look like? What did that look like in your life?
Yeah. The change happened probably in the hardest way possible. I like to learn things the hard way. um, so I always say responsibility saved my life. And it's why the book is called It's On Me, not because I'm pointing fingers, but because I think that's an incredibly empowering concept to realize that your life is dependent on you and you get to choose whatever the heck you want to do with it. So what happened for me is I think I realized I was incredibly lost. I was so unhappy, profoundly unhappy and hollow and broken. And I once I had this realization through like a panic attack and a bunch of events, I actually tried to push on people don't know this. I didn't go into so much detail in my book, but I tried to just pretend everything was fine. Like the human capacity for denial is incredible. And so I went, well, that doesn't fit with what I'm supposed to be doing. And that is asking for so much change, and change is incredibly scary. So I'm just gonna do the same thing over and over again, and hope for a different result. And so I probably did that for a little while until my panic attacks became so I so extreme. I was cycling so rapidly, so having them back to back to back, that I couldn't function. Like I couldn't leave my room. And that's the point where I got myself and got my body before I even considered implementing change. And so I started going to therapy at that time. And that was incredibly eye-opening because everything I've avoided, she pointed out. And I think for me, was a rock bottom moment in terms of, I am going to die, therefore, and I haven't lived yet. So it was like this realization of like, I'm about to die, I haven't lived. And it was in that moment that I was like, okay, I am now willing to do anything it takes in order to feel a little better. So it did not come from this profound, I didn't wake up one day and be like, I want to be authentic. I was like, I want to die because I'm having so many panic attacks. I'm so deeply unhappy. And at this point, I'm willing to do anything it takes to feel a little less shitty about myself and my life. And so that's where it came from. I started going to therapy. She pointed out a lot of realities as someone who survived, war trauma really early on. There was a lot of trauma stuff there that I just didn't want to acknowledge that it was impacting me. And I think a lot of how it manifested was that I just went into self-preservation for a really long time. Self-preservation is great, but when that's your permanent state of existing, you are not evolving, you're not being authentic. Those things, self-expression, self-awareness, that is not what you're striving for. You're striving for safety. And for years, I was just striving for safety, even though there was no immediate threat, which is something that trauma does. And everything else kind of fell to the side. And so I kind of had this moment of like, oh, my childhood was traumatic. Like for a long time, I didn't want to accept the fact that it was, or that not everyone lived through it. I was like, this is totally normal. Like it was so out of touch with reality. And part of that, it's contextual in terms of everyone else that I knew and was close to survived it. We all talked about it like it was really normal. And so she just held up a mirror. And this is why there's a little mirror on my American version of the book. It's called It's On Me, and there's a mirror on the cover so that you can look at yourself. And what she did was hold up a mirror of like how I was contributing to my own unhappiness. Because I think, yes, I had some terrible things happen to me, and it would have been really easy to become a victim to my life. And what she did a phenomenal job of being like, okay, but what responsibility do you need to be taking for being in this exact position? And that was so powerful and so empowering for me. And that's the first time I started taking responsibility. And then I just I set my life on fire. And I do not suggest that everyone needs to be so extreme. I had to be extreme to pull myself out of it, just because I was that deeply inauthentic in all areas of my life. And then it took years. A lot of it was deconstructing, setting things on fire, burning those bridges.
So
those
what was
connections.
this? Like separating, changing work? Like what did it mean in a practical,
super practical way? So I separated from my husband, and then we got a divorce. That was one of the first steps. A lot of my friendships I ended / distance because they were operating from the inauthentic Sara framework, and I understood there was no space there to be myself. I also took a semester off, and I kind of left the environment. I also understood that like I could not process or change or show up in a context where people had a very clear expectation and idea of you. It was so suffocating and so limiting that I couldn't really experience myself and express myself, because people just had a very clear vision of what I needed to be. And so I had like no money, like zero money. And I just called up some friends and was like, hey, can I sleep on your couch? And that was one of the first time as an adult that I came back to Serbia, which is a place that I avoided for a really long time, given trauma and a bunch of
Yeah.
other stuff. And so I came back and was like, I'm going to go to the town where I grew up, and like had these moments of like, where did I lose myself along the way? What is all the parts of me that I've been avoiding and hiding or ashamed of? And so yeah, I took off, I got a divorce, I, stopped a lot of my friendships. I mean, the way I dressed changed, the way I allocated my time, the way that I viewed religion and spirituality shifted, literally everything.
What was the window of time with that?
I think once I went into, I would say about 2 years of like intense, from my first panic attack to like where I started to create a sense of self and feel a bit more liberated, more responsible when all those changes actually occurred. I think it was about a 2 year span. So it was not quick. I think people just assume like once you decide, you're going to feel better immediately and it's going to be this quick change. It was incredibly, I think it took like 5 years for me to feel like myself, but it took about 2 years to dismantle my life and to feel like I had that freedom and responsibility.
Something that I'm hearing coming up a lot so far on this
Hmm.
interview is just this notion of responsibility. And
Yeah.
yeah, really, like I'm hearing how integral that really is. Responsibility saved your life. Yeah. It's
Hmm.
what would you suggest for people who two routes here. One, who know that they aren't taking enough responsibility for where they are,
Hmm.
and two, for the person who is over responsible and
Love that question
grieve
so
because
much.
of that.
Yeah. So if you're someone who knows you're not taking responsibility, been there, so much compassion for you. I think I like to get people to sit down and just go like, how do you define responsibility? What are consequences of taking responsibility? So many people have like a childhood experience of taking responsibility for something and then being shamed for it, being blamed for it, or for example, they participated 10% in something that happened and wanted to take responsibility for that 10%, and then all of a sudden everyone gave them the full 100. And there's so many reasons why we refuse to take it. I don't think it's just because we're irresponsible people. And so figuring out like, did you see your caretakers take responsibility? What is society teaching about responsibility? Just really sitting there and going like, what is the hesitation from being like, I own my life. I will own my mistakes. I will be the main, you know, um, character
In
in
the
my own
driver's
life.
seat
I
of
will
my
not be an
life.
observer.
Yeah.
Pardon?
In the driver's seat of my life.
Exactly. So it's just really exploring that and trying it out. Find a situation where like, I should have taken responsibility for that. Try it, see how it feels. Um and so that's sort of my advice usually is like what is that blockade and what are those beliefs about responsibility that are making you not do that, and changing the concept of responsibility as something that's associated to blame to something that's associated with liberation and empowerment. That's an important shift. And that needed to happen for me. If you're taking too much responsibility, and this is me being cheeky, but I said it in my book too, that's also irresponsible. That's also not responsibility because you're harming yourself. You're taking way too much on. You're responsible for way too many people. And that's actually not taking responsibility for yourself. So it's an interesting thing that when you go to either extremes, I don't think it's the healthy type of responsibility. And again, same questions of why do you tend to do that? Who are you trying to help? How are you trying to assist? Just beliefs about why that's your role, when that became your role, and what you're trying to accomplish by doing that. But I think that there is often more grace for individuals who take more responsibility than those that take none. And I totally understand where that comes from. But I do want to tell you that if you are that person, that's technically still not taking responsibility for your life.
Mm. You're calling everyone out, Sara.
Yeah, I'm so sorry. But I'm not, because I hope it'll help.
Yes, no, I'm sure it will help. Let's come to overall this idea of purpose. Do you think that it is a fallacy that we have like one particular purpose that we should all be looking for?
Yes,
Yeah.
I do. I think there's this narrative about purpose A being this like huge overarching theme in your life, that then you're just trying to kind of grasp and make sure that you're fulfilling at some point. And it reminds me a lot of essentialism in the way it looks at identity. So, quick lesson. Essentialism believes that we are given an essence and then we exist. And your point during your lifetime is to find who you are and to live that essence that was given to you. So it's kind of like a pass fail. You're either going to succeed at that or you're not. And this is where a lot of find yourself vocabulary, I think, actually stems from. Existentialism is the opposite. You first exist and then you create your essence. And I love that because it's so empowering. It's saying you're going to become whoever you want to become, or more accurately, you're going to become however you act and show up in the world. And your question was meaning. Sorry. So, no
Yeah,
coffee
no,
chat.
but
Like, yeah.
that's it.
Yeah, that's it. So I think when I think of meaning, I always think the link we're missing when we talk about it socially is that your meaning is really connected to your sense of identity. So if you believe that your identity is fluid, ever changing, impacted, if your sense of self is impacted by every conversation, every environment, everything you eat, and it's constantly evolving and shifting, so will your meaning, because it needs to remain authentic. And so I think we overcommit to certain goals or things that at once gave us meaning. And if we all reflect back to like being 20, like, yes, there's some things that might stay the same. Like for me, I always wanted to be a psych. But even for that, oh my God, what I thought I would be doing in my 30s and what I'm doing in my 30s, I couldn't have even imagined what my career is today or that this would bring me meaning. And so I think it's really important not to overcommit to any one purpose. I think it's important to make sure that whatever you're working towards is still very authentic and aligned with your current version of you. And I don't think that there is one thing that is most people don't have one thing that's going to be meaningful. It's like you're going to change your sense of meaning as you evolve, and I think that that's also okay.
Yeah, perhaps even good.
Perhaps even very necessary. Yes.
Yeah, I'm going to move into the final fast few questions. And the first thing I wanted to ask
Yes.
is, what is a piece of advice that you would give to your younger self? Let's say your 25-year-old self.
Listen to your gut. I think I didn't trust my gut enough. I didn't think that that's how I should be making choices. I was very externally focused rather than internally focused. That's what felt safe at the time. But I think looking back, I always knew what I should and shouldn't be doing, what was right and wasn't right for me. But I didn't have the self-trust and the self-confidence to actually implement those things. And now looking back, I'd be like, just trust yourself. You probably wouldn't have found yourself in a lot of these situations, or you would have gone out of them a little quicker.
Beautiful. I think that's something many of us are working on, actually, with the listening to that inner knowing and learning how to trust it as well and act on it, which can be the hardest piece, of course. Second, what is some of the best advice you've received?
Best advice that I received: not to overcommit to one version of yourself. As in to be open to wanting different things, being a different version, having different goals than what you initially, have.
Expecting or planned. Yeah. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And lastly, what is a closing message that you give to anyone who's on this healing self-development journey?
Ooh, it takes time, and it's also not a journey with a very clear destination. Considering I believe that the self is always evolving, I think that this is a journey of a lifetime. You're not going to reach authenticity and then be like, now I'm done. Now this is a sweater I'm going to wear for the rest of my life, and it's a sweater I'm going to die in. I think it's something that you're perpetually going to work on and build and create, and not in an exhausting kind of way. I think at first it might feel exhausting, but after that, I think once you get the taste of it, it's going to feel really empowering and exciting. But it is an ongoing journey, and there's no end to it. It's almost like a lifestyle more than anything else. And so, um,
Yes.
get ready and enjoy. It's not a process, it's a lifestyle, and I think there's a really important distinction between those two.
I have never heard that being described as a lifestyle, but that is great. So good. Sarah, thank you so much. It has been an absolute pleasure to connect with you.
Same. Thank you so much for having me.